Let the fire chief see that.
I should have cell phone.
It is now 3:10. I'm going to call the March work session to order. Manager Parsons, do you have updates for us?
Thank you, Mayor Clement. I think each of the items on the agenda we'll just simply discuss and introduce as we work our way through those. I would like to thank the members of council, certainly the media, and those who have joined us this afternoon for being okay and finding their way here after we had to change venues at the last minute. We did have a little calendar inconsistency and conflict, and when we went to set up the Haney Room, learned that there was an assessment center and something going on at the police station. So Beth did a very nice job of our clerk of simply kind of relocating up to here because it was available, and I appreciate everyone's patience in quickly changing route and driving a little further up or not as far on Pennsylvania, depending on which direction you were coming from. So with that, I'll simply turn it back over to you, Mayor, and we can work our way through the agenda.
Thank you. All right, consider the written decision for Mill Creek CUP amendment. If council has had time to look over it, is there a motion?
I'm abstaining from this one, so y'all.
Okay, thank you.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. And all in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And motion carries. And now the ordinance number 3033 to amend the Recreation Improvement Project Fund budget.
So relative to this item, you've got a rather detailed memo and description in your packet, and I'll certainly defer to Jessica to fill any blanks I may leave. But last year, during the county health department inspection, in order to get the pool open, it was noted that we were again having some chipping paint issues and things. We had repainted that pool a couple of years ago. So we were told essentially that that would have to be dealt with before they would permit the pool to open this coming summer. So Cindy King, our Director of Parks and Recreation, had undergone talking to a number of vendors, looking at a number of different approaches to this particular issue. You have a memo in your packet talking about that. What we landed on was an approach that, coming in at $28,923, will actually strip the paint that is there now, because part of the problem with the last effort was apparently the type of paint used and maybe some of the preparation of surface prior to the painting. But at $28,923, it is significantly less than some of the proposals and suggestions that were made that got into six figures in a couple of instances. So this particular approach, they talk about a process and a paint that can last up to 20 years, although they also were very honest that given a public pool and the amount of use that it will, that we hope it actually will see, we're probably looking at about a 10-year period for which this approach should be more than sufficient. And again, you will recall that our Sand Sharks relationship has ended due to the Sand Sharks disbanding. So this is entirely on the town. We do, in fact, have an empty pool that is prepared and ready for this work to be performed in, because we didn't have the dome over it and all of the Sand Sharks activities that had been taking place occur over this past winter. And all we're trying to do is move this forward so that we can be ready for a county inspection and a summer pool season. So with that, I'll ask Jessica if I've missed any poignant key issues out of that memo in your packet. Certainly take any questions that the council may have, and otherwise ask for the budget amendments so that we can get a purchase order issued. And again, this particular pricing has been discounted a little bit in that the vendor that has offered it is in the area already here in a few weeks and can simply kind of move right over and do our project. So that's the reason we brought it this evening as opposed to waiting until next month's meeting, in addition to trying to get the project done in time to get the pool filled, inspected, and open for the summer.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
Somewhat related. I know in past, we weren't able to do the pool with lifeguard staffing. The Sand Sharks partnership helped with that. And now that that's ended, do we anticipate having staff to be able to use it?
Well,
hopefully?
again, and the Sand Sharks, they helped with that in that they had the team there. They had some team members who were interested in guard jobs and things. We're hoping a number of them remain interested in guard jobs. That's one that we will be putting out the call for lifeguards shortly. It is a tough position to fill, and that's true across the state and across the country. We don't believe that the disbanding of the Sand Sharks will ultimately be the determining factor in whether we fill all of those positions or not. But we're not at a stage to be able to say we've failed miserably in finding guards, but we're also not at a stage to be able to say we've already more or less got a full staff. So that's just going to be the same effort that is put forward every year in trying to make sure that we can get that thing staffed properly enough to keep our typical hours.
Thank you.
I have a question. The available funds that are available, what balance does that come from?
Apologize for 1 minute, and Jessica, jump in if you've got that, because I know we talked about a couple of different options on this. I believe there was $10,000 remaining in the recreation fund in addition to some interest that had generated there that we had not yet assigned or pulled out to the general capital reserve. I'm just looking for the resolution itself. Did that cover the entire amount in the end, Jessica?
Yes, we get a transfer, 18,500, which we had.
Would be the balance against the 10,000? Okay. So otherwise, that transfer amount would be from your available fund balance.
Are there any other questions?
No, I just appreciate you guys looking into that to find a much more cost-effective way to do that. I remember, gosh, a year or two ago, we were talking about it, and it was a lot more expensive, which is why we didn't do it.
It was
But, so thank you for the due
Yeah,
diligence.
I think what we
Yeah.
looked at a year ago was some of the more intensive processes that again started to move towards six figures. And I think that project, and correct my memory if I'm off base, but I think there was some tiling and a lot of different things involved with that too, over and above just getting it painted to open.
It was also just post-pandemic, and everything was, all estimates were so high to the sky. So things are settling down a little bit. That's a good sign.
And hopefully we'll get 8 to 10 years out of it.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve ordinance 3033.
Is there a second?
Second. Third.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Okay.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? My motion carries. Thank you, guys.
Even look up.
Second there. Doesn't matter.
Let Deborah have it.
Pay attention.
All right, moving forward, rescheduling the May business meeting. I had contacted Manager Parsons about this. I know that we were discussing both Wednesday, May 15th, staying at the Douglas Center, and the alternative, I think, was still on the table of doing it on the same day, which was the 14th, because it's a smaller election, and that would allow us to not have to reschedule some of our council members' events, but also not rescheduling what's supposed to be held at the Douglas Center on the 14th.
Okay. What did you want to come out of that, what you just said? Because that just confused me.
I'm sorry, so I think it says on here May 15th. I think that we were also still discussing Tuesday, May 14th, because Deborah had a conflict on Wednesday.
Oh, okay.
And this
Okay.
location has a conflict, or that may have already been figured out, but there was a conflict here on the 15th as well.
On the 5th, okay, got it. Okay.
I feel like the election on Tuesday might be small enough that it's, I don't see an issue.
So do you want to do it on the 14th and set it back an hour? The polls would close at 7:30. Does-
Use the same room, though.
Or no,
We still change locations. I don't have a
Change
problem
location.
having,
With the polls closing, they don't pick up stuff until the next day, and we would not have a setup, and that, yeah.
Mayor, we can still do the 15th, though. Really, yeah, I'm fine with the 15th if it's the rest of the
I could
council
make
is
the
all right.
15th
Staff?
work. I'm okay with that.
You all okay over there on the 15th?
15th is good for me. I'm fine. But I'm fine either way.
Ann says she's fine either way.
Oh, okay.
But Deborah, you had something on Wednesday that you were going to have to,
It's every Wednesday I have Bible study. That's all right. I'll
Okay.
just let my congregation know. It's okay. It's
Okay.
after Easter. Hallelujah.
Right.
So yeah, no, we're all right.
okay.
Okay. All right. Is everyone okay then with Wednesday, May 15th? 6 p.m. Same location? Okay.
I'm sorry, let me ask one more question. There's still something planned here for the 15th that has to be moved.
There's a standing monthly meeting in this building on Wednesday nights, second Tuesday or second Wednesday at 6 p.m. Recreation staff has already reached out to that organization and let them know that we may need the space, offered them alternative space at no additional fee or anything in the event they wish to continue to have their meeting. They have at times in the past canceled. That's their call, but we are going to provide them alternative space in lieu of having this room.
The nature of that meeting, I think, is what I felt like maybe should not have been rescheduled, but if you all are comfortable with that.
I don't know what that is, so we can do it, I mean, if we need to move it to not mess them up, that's fine too, whatever that is.
Yeah, no, fine. What's the nature of the meeting? You said that.
Might be good to keep that consistent.
Okay, well, I'm looking for a motion to either have the meeting on Tuesday in the Haney Room, which is still open, it can still be
It is
filmed.
available Tuesday evening, yes.
Okay, and the meeting can still be broadcast.
It can still be broadcast.
It's the first budget hearing, which I think,
Budget hearing, and then the other conversation we had was around what may be coming out of planning board at that point.
okay,
So.
and BJ, can you give us a quick update if there's something that you feel like would be something coming from planning?
This is for their May town council meeting. There are 2 items coming from planning board, one of which is a text amendment regarding the separation between cellular towers and residential zones. And the other is an amendment of the Ace Hardware CDP to allow some additional uses in that CDP.
I feel like I'm comfortable having it at the Haney Room.
Yeah, we accommodated quite a few people the day we did those interviews. So I know we've had meetings where there's a lot of people in there, and it, you know, it's tight, but we got it to work.
Now we know about the seating and don't block doors.
So
All right, council, how would you like to proceed?
So we're just relocating the spot. Is there a,
It would not be a
Motion?
date change. I think that,
it's like today, right?
yes, but I think I prefer to have a motion on changing the location. Is that okay?
Can I make a motion that we continue to meet at the same time on Tuesday, May the 14th, and we move the meeting and give notice to the public that we're moving the meeting to the Haney Room?
I second that motion.
In favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes. Thank you. All right. Moving on, consider executing a professional service contract with CPL to complete a feasibility study for an addition to the finance building. Reagan, is it you presenting? Just kidding. We're going to give Jessica a moment.
And while we're giving Jessica a moment, Beth, if you find it in your heart to text us with that moved venue in May, if that's on your radar, you will not hurt my feelings if you text me and remind me about that. You want me to remind you the day of? Yeah, whatever. I mean, yeah, thanks. I'll probably,
Top of your agenda also, if that will help.
I'll have it.
And Gerald, if you'll put something out on social media as well about that location change before the May meeting? Yep. Thank you. All right, Assistant Manager Roth.
Good
Thank you.
afternoon. So when we last spoke regarding the finance and admin building potential renovations, council requested that we follow up with CPL, who did the programming and schematic designs, to see if they could evaluate the feasibility of potentially adding an addition to the finance building, which could either be multiple stories in the rear or potentially an addition in the front. So I reached out to them, and they have provided a cost proposal to do that work. It's a fee of $24,500, and that would essentially include several different steps. The first step that they would do is to go to the Historic District Commission, and they wouldn't submit a formal application out of a desire to minimize expenses to us, but they have talked to BJ about kind of the minimum level that would be needed to just kind of have a upfront conversation and talk to them about their potential willingness to approve either or both of those additions, and if they would be willing to do that, if there's any particular nuances that they want to see in the design. Because that's really kind of the first decision point that we need to understand, because if the Historic District Commission, essentially is not willing to advance that, then that's a discussion we need to have. So once they get through that meeting, then they would dive into some more of the structural analysis and the space programming and different things like that and see whether both additions make sense. They would also do an opinion of probable cost, which you're familiar with because they did that for the initial scope. They would bring all of that to a meeting to discuss it with you all and let you answer questions, and then that would give us more information about if we're interested in advancing any of those concepts. So the cost of that is $24,500. I did want to mention there's kind of a budgetary impact that we want to be mindful of here. Our current budget includes $100,000 that was to be used for kind of this pre-construction, almost kind of pre-design work on the finance building, the admin building, and Fire Station 81. We have completed the first phase of that work with finance and admin, and that was $34,050. So that leaves us $65,000 roughly, 66 roughly, an available balance. Chief Cameron has also gotten a proposal from ADW Architects to do a very similar process on Station 81 to what you've already seen from CPL, that initial preliminary planning schematic design. That cost proposal is $57,600. So I bring that up because on hand today, we have enough to either do one of those projects without a budget amendment. So we could either execute the contract with CPL for $24,050 to continue looking at the feasibility of an addition to the finance building, or we can execute the proposal with ADW to do some programming and schematic designs on the fire station. If we wanted to do both, we need to bring you a budget amendment of about $16,000 so that we have enough funds to do both.
Chief, what's, because I don't know, what's 81 need, or what are y'all looking to do there?
So the station was actually built in 2000. We moved into it in January 2001. It's been continuously occupied since that time frame. Obviously, as you probably know, maybe not always realize, fire station is never empty. We don't go on vacation. There's always somebody there. So some pretty lengthy living in the station, if you will. So we're really looking at, it was designed for 6 firefighters and 5 administrative staff. We're at 7 firefighters every day, and we're at 7 administrative staff every day. So we're really looking for the future, a couple things. One, to go through and just do some general spacing of where we can get more space provide more space for the future, for current, but into the future. We know at some point in time, we're probably gonna have to do something with some additional personnel.
You also have EMS in there.
Yeah, I didn't mention that. EMS is also in the building as well with 2 other paramedics. So if you look back in time, and some of you will get to walk through that building on Thursday of this week, but we had a training room. We got rid of our training room about 10 years ago, and we gave that to EMS, who was contracted to be in the building, which is a benefit to the town. So we've about used all of the space. Some of that, as well as probably remodeling the kitchen, redesigning some of that stuff. We're not looking at what I don't think is a great big remodel, but we probably want to add some offices and add some of those things and maybe some additional training space. We're actually using our conference room right now as an office. And we also have 2 fire marshals that that are sharing an office, 2 desks in there. It was designed for one person. We should have 2 people in there. So that's kind of we're not looking to do this work immediately, but we're at the point where we need someone, an architect, to come out and give us some design work. The company we recommend, ADW, is a company that did the design work on the Fire Station 82. They specialize in fire stations. They see things a little bit differently. They don't see it as a house with a garage attached to it. It is designed to function as a fire station, which takes into account response times and getting in and out of the building quickly with larger apparatus. So that's really the gist of what we're looking at.
Going to make those changes without changing the footprint of the building or not?
I wouldn't say that exactly. What I would say, that would be obviously one of the things we want to look at. I don't know that it's going to be possible. That's one of the things we have to have that architect help us to do. If there is design changes to the building, the footprint changes, it would not be something that would be gigantic because there's just not a lot of space on that lot. But obviously, we're not trying to pick that fire station up and move it. So I'm not saying there wouldn't be some footprint changes, but that is something that's on the table to consider.
Are we taking advantage of the Fire Station 2 or 82? As far as
We are.
everyone who's at this downtown station, nobody can be relocated. They all need to be downtown.
Yeah, we're set to design from a response standpoint. So the other station, just 82, has four firefighters and 2 paramedics in it. It was actually designed for seven firefighters and 2 paramedics. So we've got some growth potential there. The issue is really the apparatus and where that apparatus needs to be at because of our fire load and call volume, which obviously, if you know, within 2.5 to 3 miles of Station 1 or 81 is where the majority of our calls are typically going to be. So it is not uncommon for that station to run 2 and 3 calls at the same time. So we feel like we're not at the point growth-wise that we need to move additional people to the other station.
Do we know that we would need to kind of talk to the Historic Society before we did know, so, yeah. that's
One
been-
question I had about that is, why do we need to pay a lot of money for consultants to talk to our own historic commission? Granted, I know they could probably answer some questions, but can't we get at least an initial, like, what would your response be to this? Because I don't know, I hate to spend $25,000 for them to talk to our own committee.
It's a bigger scope.
The structural engineer
Yeah, than that.
analysis of it, that's just simply part of the, I'll call it the pre-design phase. Because
Right.
if you decided to move forward and Historic District Commission was cool, there's clearly another design contract coming behind this that's much larger. That's purely for the structural engineer look at the property.
I would recommend that if we do move forward on approving the CPL feasibility study, that it's conditional upon talking to the Historic Commission before and at least getting an idea of how they feel about it.
And that's in their scope. It's,
Okay.
if you look at the order of it, that's literally the
mean,
first thing.
So before we sign the contract with them, I think we ought to do that. And then in their scope, they can start the work. But I think we can have a conversation with our own. And if we need to set up a joint meeting for us to have that conversation, I'm fine. I just don't want to pay someone, I agree. There's no need to pay someone else to go back to our Historic Commission and say, I'm just afraid if they're against it, where are we from there? I mean, we've already paid somebody, probably, we get refund on some of it, but we've paid someone to have a conversation with our own. Yeah.
The QJ nature of the Historical Commission, that's fine.
Sorry?
The QJ nature of the Historical Commission, it's fine to have that.
QJ would be on an application for a certificate of appropriateness that's before them. So once there is ultimately a design and a project to move forward on, that changes the rules. This is purely an informational feedback type of scenario. There isn't an application before them to handle in a QJ manner. This is more of a work session planning type of approach than
Yeah,
any.
conceptually, quasi judicial.
They can't give them a hard yes, because there's nothing before them to give a hard yes. It's really more, is this even within the realm of possibility? And if you were to see an application, Are there factors beyond your guidelines that you would want to see in the building or expect to see that would make for a more potentially successful application?
I mean, I would like to advocate to use CPL to go to the Historic District Commission. We don't have architects on our staff. We don't necessarily understand what all of those codes are going to mean. So, and they do plan to put together, it's probably a loose sketch. So they plan to go to the Historic District Commission with something and some details so that they can understand what they're talking about. And I'm not, staff will certainly be present and will participate in that discussion, but I'm just not sure that we could do it justice, and we might end up harming the project if we can't answer all of the questions. My other concern would be if we don't pay it up front, we're probably going to end up paying it later, because then the amount of time for them to get up to speed and understand exactly what the Historic District Commission said, I think.
Historic District is, the commission deals more with visual impact as opposed to actual building codes, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
There is some code. Yeah.
Exterior. So this is what I'm thinking is either us as a council or someone with staff or both just sits down with the Historic Commission and says, do you all have a problem conceptually with us changing this building? And if they say yes, then we don't do it. I mean, I feel like
Like a joint meeting?
invest, or
Is that possible?
does it need to be in a public setting, or do we need to just have that
I was
conversation?
going to say, a joint meeting is possible, and yes, must be public.
Okay.
Or you could simply assign a committee of two or appoint an individual to
I-
an HDC meeting, or, I mean, there's multiple ways to go about it, but the rules that surround those conversations vary depending on how you approach it.
Was there feedback from the article in the paper? Did anyone look at comments?
I don't
see
recall
anything,
seeing any. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely like at least that preliminary.
Yeah.
If they're like, you can never put anything in that courtyard, why are you asking? Then we would know.
If it were my home, that's what I would do. And before I go and pay someone to design or have a sketch of what my house would change to look like, I would like to go to the Historic Commission and say, are you guys going to have a problem with me changing this building? Because my personal experience with the Historic District Commission was that depending on who's on it, it ebbs and flows on what they will allow or not allow. The first time we talked about my home renovation, it was a no. And then it turned into yes. So I think it's worth having a very brief conceptual conversation before.
And I guess separating these two out, I didn't even realize that those needs were up. I mean, I think we're going to definitely have to, I know we're kind of back and forth as to exactly what we want to do as far as the town administrative offices, and there's a lot of options, and we're still trying to figure that out. But it sounds like, I mean, this fire station is where it is, and that's the only option for having that. I guess at this point, until we get more information, I'm more inclined to say move forward with the other one, the what did you call it, CPW?
CPO, ADW.
Combining them, the fire station one, because I do think, I mean, there's going to be continued need for that public service. I think it's inevitable. And we may well end up having finance building redevelopment be our solution to the other. But I didn't get a consensus that we were 100% there yet. And I know this is intended. We may still end up doing it after we do the initial feel out of Historic Commission. But of the two, I'm more prepared to say, let's move forward with the fire one today if we're deciding on one of them or both.
So does there need to be notice on any project fund budget request? Does that need to have been given public notice about the fire station, or are we okay?
I think it's already budgeted for.
So we're using what's there.
Yeah,
And if we then
unless you use
exceed-
it for something else, and that's where
we-
you're short.
If we
Yes.
exceed the 100,000 that's been set aside, then we
Right.
would have to jump through the
budget
hoop
amendment.
of another project fund budget request, okay?
I've got a question. I think I know the answer to it, but I'm going to go ahead and ask. We spent $34,000 doing a programming and schematic design for two buildings, admin and finance. The fire station is $57,000 for one building, which is significantly higher. Is there a reason that it costs more or that much more?
think, don't they have a copy of that letter? So there's a letter in your packet from the architects. It's broken up into 6 phases, and that phase takes you all the way to construction, or through construction, actually. So phase 1, they've already done, which was basically a preliminary meeting to see kind of where the scope was going to lead them. So task number 2, I guess, is $22,700. Task number 3 is $34,900. Those 2 tasks, that's how you get to the 57. So task 2 is programming and space needs and building drawings, and they come in and evaluate the building as a whole, is in task 2. Task 3, they take what they find in that evaluation and do the actual design work of what you end up getting to. So that's just how they've broken theirs up, just a different way of what this architect does and how they do that.
I can add a little more to that. When we met, we actually met with both firms together, and they both submitted proposals on all 3 buildings. We knew when we met with them on the fire station that we were considering an addition there. And so I think if you look through their proposal, they talk about some of the work that we've now asked CPL to, prepare and do the structural analysis and site survey and different things like that. So it is a slightly more expanded scope than CPL does, because they know upfront that we're looking at the feasibility of an addition.
And there's no termination date in the ADW letter, but there is a 90-day termination as far as maintaining the quoted price in the CPL letter, which brings you to June 15th-ish. That letter is signed March 15th.
Yep, and
With the 90
with that
day
in mind, we have
validity.
3 upcoming Historic District Commission meetings that we could put this on the agenda. The first is April the 11th. These are all Thursdays, correct, BJ? And what time do they meet? Is it 5 o'clock? 5:30. 5:30. So Thursday, April 11th, May 19th, and then June the 13th.
I'd suggest April or May. You're really pushing the envelope if you go as far as June.
Yes, Thursday, April 11th, Thursday, May 19th.
Something's wrong with May 19th. That's what shows on our calendar, but May 19th looks like it's actually a Sunday.
Oh,
So I guess
okay.
it would be Thursday, the 16th maybe, the 3rd.
Oh, before.
Yep, that is correct. Which, you know what? Yeah, your April 11th date is good. I will offer up that April 11th is the day after our budget retreat and 2 days after a council meeting, so you may be really tired of seeing all of us at that point. So yes, that would be Thursday, May the 16th, and let's just double check, June the 13th.
I'm sorry. I'm looking at the Historic District Commission website on our site, microsite on our site. It says meetings are held on the 2nd Thursday of the month at 4:00 p.m.
4 o'clock. Okay.
I have a question, Chief.
Yes, sir.
The task 4 on the proposed fees, it doesn't exactly say that they're necessarily considering addition to the building, but the fee certainly seems like it.
It would suggest that, and like I said, we had a preliminary meeting a couple of months ago, and they may have come to the conclusion that we're going to have to do an addition based
Right.
on space needs. Obviously, dealing with this company before, they are pretty fire department friendly. They don't put dates in times on their stuff, and the reason they don't do that for us is because they consider us a past customer. They handle it a little bit differently than some others. But if there was not an expansion, I'm sure that price would
Right.
change. And obviously, we can verify that if we need.
Right.
We would verify that.
Council like to proceed?
So I think it's pretty important to bring the historic district into the loop. So I would suggest that even though we may in fact be exhausted with town business on April the 11th, that we plan to make at least acknowledgement to the historic district and get some feedback on April 11th.
Would you suggest that all of us
Meeting?
joint meeting, or have a task force of 2 plus staff?
I'm happy to be on a task force of 2 or to have any other 2 people do it. I think it simplifies things if it's just a couple of us. I don't know that we need to.
I would have to move a lot of stuff to make that work anyway, so if, I don't need to be on the task force.
Your wife is on the historic commission, so let's not put you. How about Ann and I?
Unless, just that, Deborah, not to exclude you, but.
I'm willing, yeah, definitely. I'd like to be on that.
Goodman, yeah, Molly Goodman's not on there anymore.
Okay.
Term ended.
Okay.
Brendan, you want to, right? You want to be on a task force, right?
No. I didn't know that it had ended. I thought it was April. So I need to tell her that.
You did a bad job convincing her to stay. All right.
So April 11th, so if it's acceptable with everyone else, I think that Taylor and I meet with the Historic District Commission to get some feedback on April 11th. And then if we put this back onto the calendar for the next work session, does that make it, following that, the May work session, to consider whether or not to do a budget amendment? And I also wonder about whether or not we can break out the ADW contract, and would they be willing to, unless and until we reach task 4, and that becomes can we do a partial payout on their assessment?
Yes, we can. All we're actually asking for today is through task 3 anyway.
Okay.
We only want to do task 2 and 3 is all we're asking for at this point.
So do you think that's the higher amount if we're not considering an addition, if we're not?
Well, I think task 2 and 3 will tell us where we're going. And then
Okay.
we come back and talk to you about task 4.
And do you think it's negotiable at all, the amount that they suggested?
I don't know that their price is negotiable, but I think what we do to the building is obviously negotiable. Let's see where we see where we land at, how much of that we actually do and what their recommendations are.
Okay.
So I think,
I'm not sure where that leaves us, so,
well, I think the only thing we're asking for this cost analysis is just task 2 and 3 at this point.
So the 57,000. Okay.
That's all we're asking for now.
All right. Does the council feel comfortable moving forward, approving the fire station request?
So isn't that already?
I'll have to approve it.
Right, that was brought to the table because the structural analysis, when we put this budget together, was not contemplated because we weren't, that only came out of the last meeting when we talked about maybe going vertical and such. So this was brought to the table in that it was to let you know that there's money on hand. However, if we spend that money on the structural analysis, we may end up short on the fire project.
So when you're
it-
100,000, was it anticipating the fire and what we already did?
Yes.
Okay, so we're just sort of following what y'all were seeing a year ago. If we move forward with this and then get more information on the other.
but we would still be, if we proceeded to move on the CPL contract, we'd still be short. A little bit short. Right, okay, right. And that would need, again, how much time to jump through the hoops to make that presentation to us? You don't need
I mean,
to,
honestly, if you end up going to the Historic District Commission on the 11th of April, our intent, I believe, would be to go ahead and put it on the April work session to,
Okay.
depending on what you hear, either move forward or not on the structural analysis, so.
okay, and then to be clear, as far as the Historic District Commission, what the mayor and I are attempting to do is just invite them into the conversation and say, the only reason we would put on the brakes would be if they were adamantly opposed to an addition either on this back half of the building, behind the barrel ceiling, or coming out onto the courtyard. Is that correct? Either going up or out?
If they were adamantly against both.
Both of
yes.
those, then that would be, we would revisit it. But otherwise, we're just saying here, we want to put you in the loop because this is going to be Historic Commission properties. Yeah.
And we can talk more offline before the 11th, but I think we need to understand, are they okay with one of those additions, both of those additions?
Right, okay.
Also, is there a maximum number of stories that they're willing to approve? So any of those types of questions that we can get and pass on to CPL will help their analysis.
I'm going to offer that even if all of that works out and we move forward, I think there is still value in putting the design people in front of the HDC ahead of
I
doing a
agree.
design.
I agree. And I think, and you and I have talked about this, but I think that's a pretty limited amount of square footage, and there's not any room to blow out the back there of the finance building. So you're looking at, for each additional, and Ray and I talked about this earlier today, you're looking at a required bathroom on every floor, you're looking at a required elevator, you're looking at a required janitor's closet, you're looking at a lot of architectural requirements, and hopefully somebody can give us an easy answer with an estimate of how much square footage would you actually have per level that could be used specifically constructively for offices, because there's going to be a lot of hoops we need to jump through in order to just comply with the requirements that would be there just from building a town office. So-
Understanding also, that building, I think, had 2 additions to it since its
Right,
original construction.
Right, exactly.
How much at the budget hearing that week? I mean, there's absent of the wants versus needs discussion, even for needs, you have to pay for them.
Right.
And these construction costs are a lot, whether it's fire station or those other rehabs. Do you anticipate asking us or showing us the potential funding of either of these projects? Because that's a whole nother conversation. I didn't know if you were prepared and wanting us to have that analysis for budget.
Coming off of an all-day budget session yesterday, that none of these projects from a construction standpoint are budgeted given current revenue streams.
They're not even feasible at this point, so it would
Not
be.
on current
yeah,
revenue
right.
streams.
So it'd be a matter of us dealing with how to create a budget stream to be able to do that, but, okay. All right.
That begins with an installment loan in all likelihood, but then it's a matter of paying back the P&I on the installment loan, so.
That Thursday meeting is at 4 on the 11th. I think I'd like to be part of that as well, Mayor. And
Yeah, we have to have
Quorum.
one fewer person.
Issue, which is, but I'm a happy, yeah, I'm happy to.
No, and no, it's good, it's solid for you.
This far in advance to simply announce that will be that a quorum of council will be present for it.
Let's do that then, and then that way, if you're available.
I don't even think
that's
we need to
great.
technically call it a joint meeting because council won't be making any decisions, and I'm going to defer to Mac to correct me, but you're not there to make any decisions. You're there to present a concept to your board or commission. It's still their meeting.
Great, okay.
Did I trip over myself, Mr. Attorney?
Because I think that works out better. All right, April 11th, action item 3D, we are taking no action, delaying feasibility study until after the historic commission meeting. Okay, perfect.
So where does that leave the fire station then?
It's already budgeted for, so I think they're moving forward with,
All right, good to go.
okay.
Look at you, you just, bam, you're killing it. Yeah, wow.
All right, moving forward to council updates and discussion, the Mount Hope Cemetery plot fees.
That is me. So if you're not aware, the Parks and Grounds Division is the team that oversees the Mount Hope Cemetery maintenance. And Graham Purcell, the superintendent, he asked me if we could update the code to deal with some maintenance issues and things like that they're dealing with. And so I said, of course, we want to make that so that you can maintain it. He also told me that he frequently gets requests, and even since we have published this memo, he's had an additional request from people who would like to either bury a casket plus an urn or 2 urns. And the way our current codes read, you can only put one in a plot, either a casket or an urn, but no combination of both. So we did talk to Mac about this, and he researched the state laws, and there is nothing that prohibits us from approving that type of burial, other than we just need to amend our codes. So as I started looking through Chapter 92, which has the different guidelines for the cemetery, I noted in there that we have the fees in there for how much we sell those plots for. And if you'll recall, over the past year or so, we've been working to get the different fees out of the Code of Ordinances and in a standalone fee schedule. Partly for transparency, it makes it a lot easier to understand our fees if they're not buried in all these chapters of code. And also, if you want to update the fee schedule, it makes it a little simpler than having to go through an actual code amendment. So when I saw that those fees were in there, I thought that that would be a good plan to take there. I did note that the current fees are $400 for a town resident to purchase a plot and $500 for a non-resident. It looks like those have not been updated in roughly 30 years or so. It looks like it coincided with a time when we opened a new section of the cemetery and we had about an additional 600 plots to offer for sale. And so, so I took note of that, and I also researched probably close to 50 different municipal cemeteries across North Carolina to just try to understand how our fees compare if we're, in the ballpark. I think we are a little low. The average price for a single plot in a municipal cemetery is $961, and it's very common to charge non-residents about twice that fee. So with that in mind, I really just wanted to kind of bring this information to you and understand if there's any desire to increase those fees so that we could talk through that now, and then we can prepare that fee schedule accordingly with whatever rates you would like it to be, whether it's the same 400, 500. I would also like, and then we would also like to address the fees if you're willing to do the double burial. We would like the fees to accommodate that. And then I'd also like to add a grave locate fee. This is something that's very common in municipal cemeteries. Our staff does not do the burial work itself. We don't dig, we don't bury, we don't cover. The funeral homes do that. But our staff is called a lot, and even called on weekends when they're not technically on call, to come to the cemetery and locate graves. Sometimes this is for a funeral home. Sometimes this is just a family member comes from out of town and wants help locating a grave. We spent about 40 hours last year just locating graves for people. So I don't think it's unreasonable to collect a, nominal fee to do that work.
Is there a number on our website where if you are in town visiting the cemetery and you need help finding a cemetery or a plot, is there a phone number to call?
There is, and I don't, honestly, I didn't ask Graham how he gets those calls. We do have an after-hours number for water emergencies, so I don't know if it comes in there. Some of them I do know, they do call ahead of time and say, hey, I'm coming up from Florida next week. Can someone meet me on Saturday morning? So, but then sometimes with the funeral homes, they do know how to get in touch with Graham, and they will call sometimes on the weekends and need an emergency locate. So
Do you know, Jessica, how many plots are left?
102.
we have about 300, yes.
Oh, there it is, sorry. And this question is from my ignorance in how municipal cemeteries work. That's our only source of revenue specific to this.
Correct.
So say hypothetically, all 302 are sold, then all taxpayers are just subsidizing the upkeep and maintenance, and there's no more fees coming from it.
Exactly.
Clearly, if you take a look at the hours Jessica has talked about, 13 hours a week, et cetera, these fees are not remotely covering the cost of that. It's pretty much a subsidization across the board.
How many a year do y'all do approximately get purchased? I mean,
I don't know that number. I mean, I do know that in the roughly 30 years since we opened the new section, we've sold about 300. So average is, 10 plots a year. So it's not a lot that we're selling, but we've sold a lot in the past. So, some of those people, if they bought 40, 50 years ago, we may be doing burials now, so.
It's the one that's over Morganton Road, right?
It is.
Yeah, because now the cemetery in West Southern Pines is all filled up. So everybody goes to Mount Hope. So that may increase the number of, number of plots sold.
Element of what Jessica just said, when you're looking at the cost of buying a new plot versus some of the other fees she's talked about, 600 is the number of the new section that was opened there 30 years ago. There are far more graves out there than that 600. There's 300 left of the 600 that was the expansion, but there's
over
also what we call
2,000.
the old section. And a lot of times the location work and stuff is also done over in that section, so.
section is full?
We are not currently selling plots in
question.
the old section.
We do not sell plots in the old
Yeah.
section because the records are hit or miss. And I'll
Yes.
leave it at that.
Seems just really weird to be asking this question. Do you have a market value for grave siting fee?
I mean, I think something along the lines of $50, and then maybe $100 if it's after hours when they're not normally working. It sounds reasonable to me. Because it can take, sometimes it can take them about an hour to locate a grave, especially if it's in an old section, so.
So maybe when you go back and give us some quotes on potentially changing this, if we can find some market values on if it exists in other cemeteries, and there is a grave locating fee that's reasonable, maybe bring that along with a proposal on fee changing.
Is there a legitimate way to pass that on to the workers who are doing this without compensation on weekends?
On weekends, they're being compensated.
So they have an overtime payment then?
Yeah, they're
Okay.
either on overtime or for some reason they haven't reached the overtime threshold to the
Okay.
FLSA.
Okay.
But yeah, they're not coming in for free. It's just they're
Okay.
having to come in
Okay.
for that purpose.
But we would like
paying them.
for that fee to be covered with a grave siting.
I think
fee
it's
set.
reasonable
Right. Okay.
because it's
Okay.
not work that we would otherwise be doing.
I guess one of the questions I have is someone that is there an expectation? Well, let me go back. They're not just citing graves, they're citing plots also.
Correct.
Plots and graves. If they're citing a plot, is there an expectation, or is it standard that the town tells them where that plot is, or the funeral home?
A lot of times in the new section, the funeral home is able to locate the plots on their own. They're just better laid out in the new section. So sometimes they do the locations all on their own. But a lot of them tend to be people who are looking for the graves of their ancestors and they want help, and especially in the older section because it is not laid out kind of in as much of a grid system. Some of those headstones, they get buried by pine straw. I know Graham has said sometimes he'll come out and dig and dig and dig and dig and finally find something when you move inches and inches of pine straw. So,
Well, in that scenario, though, no one could find it except for staff,
correct.
right? So I would hate to see them get charged a fee when nobody could find it without staff.
I have kind of mixed feelings on that. I feel like if it's the type of thing where if you were needing to bury someone and you legitimately couldn't find the plot, I think that's one thing because you can't even get access to your plot. I think when we have ancestors who aren't our citizens and are expecting our town staff to come out on weekends and kind of help them, locate.
How often occurrence is the weekend, though, compared to the week?
It's
10%?
I don't know how often weekends are, but it's close to 50-50 that they locate for ancestors versus locate for funeral homes.
When Ann and I were doing our tour 2 years ago, do you recall being in the IT department and there is some sort of plotting where you can actually see, you can zoom in and see the names on the graves? Have we finished, do you not know that? Have we finished that, like Mount Hope Cemetery? Or is there like some sort of a digital list with names?
We do have GIS records that have not been publicly released. We are hoping to get them to a point where they can be publicly released. And I don't think the work has been all done yet on them, which is why they haven't been.
On the chart in the finance office. I didn't know we had more than that, so that's good to hear.
We've gone digital since you did your tour.
Yeah. Okay, well, do you all have more questions or you?
It's not a lot of money at the end of the day,
Yeah.
either way.
Yeah.
for them, and it's not a lot of money for the town either, so it's.
No, it's not. It really just, as I was doing my research, and I noticed that there's a lot of different types of fees that different cemeteries charge, and that one stood out to me because we don't charge it, and I do know that we spend, hours doing that, so.
Say from a big picture policy perspective, I'm okay with the fee to a point because I do see what it does. And as you're looking for the single plot, double plot, if these are 30, 40 years old, it's okay increasing them. However, I want to keep in mind that this provides a low-cost place for people to purchase that need a spot for burial. So I don't want to raise them. So one, because it's not a big finance-driven, it's not
Right,
making us a
no.
lot of money, if anything. So I don't want to raise them so high that you're excluding folks that really need a good alternative that can't afford otherwise. So yes, raise them, but not crazy, I'm giving you a little guidance, but that's just me.
I'm just curious, why is it so difficult to find those graves and plots in the old part of the cemetery? What?
It's a combination of things. Some of it is just the records. I mean, when you were dealing with hand-drawn old records that some of them we don't have.
Oh, we're talking about like-
through no fault of anybody that's here today.
Late
That cemetery's been
1800s,
open a long
like?
time. I'm sorry?
late 1800s?
I
early
honestly don't
1900s?
know how far some of those records go back. But some of it, if you've been in older cemeteries, you see that like the writing, it weathers away and it's hard to even read some of the writing. And, we used to only allow, I think there's a different name for it, but the stones that are at ground level. And so those, it's easier for them to get covered up by pine straw and debris. So if you don't really understand where you're looking for, you may not find them. We do allow, in certain areas of the cemetery now, the above-ground headstones, which are always going to be easier to locate. So it's just a combination of things out there.
I'm personally okay with all the recommendations that you have. I would say when you come back with a suggestion on raising the fee, I really appreciate the chart. If you'll reorder it in numerical order for resident instead of alphabetical order and separate out double plots from single plots.
I think I may have done that.
But we have it, yeah, it's there.
Oh, I was just not scrolling far enough.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
the second.
Yeah, we
Let's
are.
see. The
we are
first chart is alphabetical order by municipality. The second chart
Is numerical by
is
resident.
by resident plot fee.
Will you pull out the double plots and put them on a separate chart?
I did on the very back.
Oh my gosh.
There's not a lot of that.
Look at you. All right, you've done it all. Okay. I mean, I agree with Bill. I think raising it's fine. I think keep it reasonable.
Is there an amount that?
By
you all-
reasonable, are you all comfortable flirting with the average, which is $961?
I mean, on my notes, I wrote down between 750 and 1,000 is probably where I feel like is reasonable.
For
If-
residents,
Yeah,
right?
if we need to keep it lower because make sure that people have access to it, I'm okay with that too.
I mean, even that average is well below,
Right. I think that,
so.
I would say 1,000 and 2,000 for non-residents is what I would say.
So it looks like the average on the cost differential is about 50% for non-residents. So I think that maybe we raise the non-resident more than just a 25% or 20% increase.
I'm okay with that. I mean, and what you just said was 100%. If you, but,
I know. I also think this hasn't been raised for 30 years,
Yeah.
and honestly, there's been some, there've been some changes. But I also respect the fact that, that you're about to make. Go ahead.
Just that,
No, I think the reasonableness is really important.
yeah, again, the African Americans in West Southern Pines basically always buried out there.
Right.
And they cannot. And unfortunately, we know that they're not necessarily on the same economic level as
Correct.
a lot of others. So you raise it up too high. And it's going to be.
And that I was banking on you pushing me back down, that's great. But I also don't know historically, was any fee charged for do you know this, for the West Southern Pines Cemetery? Was historically any
we
fee
don't,
charged?
we didn't know.
Ours.
Town did. We don't know that.
And that was Buckham land.
Around
Right, that was Buckham Land, and I don't know what they did. I assume there was some fee charged, and there are Buckhams still, perhaps with their finger on the pulse of what happened there.
Clarify, when I said the cost differential, so instead of the increase for non-resident to new non-resident, the cost differential is actually resident versus non-resident now. Does that make sense? Okay, because you said that she went up 100% because it went from, never mind.
She said 1,000, 2,000.
Oh, I thought you said, for some reason I heard 1,200. I put the two in the wrong place.
And
in
then,
my
and
head.
that's fine, I
Okay.
was getting the
Making sure we're all on the
conversation
same
started,
page.
and I'm sympathetic and empathetic to everything that I knew Deborah was going to say, and just
Yeah,
and I wanted the council to give Jessica some idea where we were coming from, because otherwise she's trying to exercise some ESP on where we're all thinking. So I think that it's important that we give her some guidance, and I'm all for being reasonable, so I think it's also important that we identify what we believe is reasonable, because otherwise she's just shooting in the dark, which is not.
there's non-resident fee based on who's being buried or who's buying it.
I would assume, and I thought about this, I would assume it's based on who's buying it.
So that, I would have a problem with that if they're trying to bury a family member and they live out of town and it's someone who's, I don't know.
So maybe it's
could
resident and
define that
non-resident
in-
has to do with the
Yeah.
deceased. That's established
think
by the
I would-
deceased, so if you make.
Possible. These things are bought before people die.
Right.
We can't do it that way. I mean, at least the way I see it.
State lawyer steps up. Nicely done,
Right,
nicely
because-
played.
Someone lived here, bought it, moves away.
Right.
dies, comes back and is buried here.
You owe us.
You owe us an extra $1,000 and $50 to find it.
100.
Okay.
Okay, I'm open to recommendations from the council.
And I think it would certainly be okay to charge more than double for the non-residents with the goal of keeping town sales low, because I think that's a very valid point. And there's numerous cities who do charge more than double, because you have to consider, this is all funded out of our general fund. So a non-resident buying a plot has never paid us a dime for any of the work that we have to do forever out there.
Reason they're buying a plot here. There's a reason that they want a body to rest here. It's not because they're just taking advantage of land. My guess is they have a tie to the community that's important to them, whether it's being near living family or being buried in the place that they were born and lived up until the moment they moved away, and we need to charge them more.
So you're right, but we need to identify your question. Who are we talking about? We're talking about the purchaser, right? Is the resident or non-resident? Is that, do we all agree on that?
I think that's the only thing it can be.
Okay. So it's not the deceased, so we're not going to argue, which could be ugly, yeah. So the purchaser at the time of purchase, is that cool? So if somebody buys a plot and then moves to Minneapolis, they still count as a resident when they bought the plot, right? I'm just trying to give
that makes
Jessica,
sense. Yep.
Jessica's going to have an
Makes sense,
impossible
so-
task if we don't give her some guidelines.
That makes sense.
And then I think that, I think that we need to raise the rates some. Deborah, I'm looking to you for guidance on what you think is right.
You said we're at 400 right now for resident and 500, you said for non-resident?
Correct.
We're less than half the average right now.
So I was flying right to the average, because I assume some council will talk about this in 30 more years, but there won't be any plots left, so it's a moot point.
Well, it'll be about full in 30 years, 10 a year.
Yeah, there you go.
See, I'm not, I'll be honest with you, I'm not the best person on death stuff, because I cremated my husband, and I have enough land that I was able to put his ashes right there by my house. So,
Right.
I didn't do all of that big casket and, no.
Well, and my sense is, just the way the world works, is whatever the fee is, it's going to get passed on from the funeral home through, I mean, so let's be honest about that. But I just think, again, out of a sense of fairness to Jessica, if she's making a proposal to us, we need to give her some idea where our brain is. And maybe you don't go straight to the average. Maybe you maybe you ease up on you say for the next 5 years, the rate is this, and after that, the rate is this, and you go ahead and build in a, if you will, please, a COLA, which is irony noted.
About 750.
I'm doubling it if it has really been 30 or 40 years, which would be 800. It's kind of right in the middle of the average and median. And I'm fine if we do 100 or 150% of the non-resident. That one doesn't bother me as much.
Right, I agree.
So raising it up from 400 to 800.
And then from 500
That's a grand, y'all. Go ahead. That's a grand.
Right.
No, I hear you. I hear you. You know, I don't know.
In a lot of situations, it's actually 1,600, so.
Correct.
That's true.
And if we have the option of a double plot, where it's 2 urns or 1 casket, 1 urn, there's a chance that it ends up being lower per person.
And I'm going to just make a guess that opening up the possibility of that double plot in the urns may actually expedite that 10 per year rate that we've seen.
Exactly.
Because whereas the rate really has not been discussed in my 20 years here, and in large part because it's such a small amount of the budget, and even quadrupling the fee isn't going to generate enough to take care of the land. The issue of the additional urn has come up from time to time, not so much amongst an entire council, but where maybe a mayor has received a call from somebody. And I think the availability of that may result in a few sales that didn't occur in the past because it was not allowed under the code. So that's just as a piece of information.
So you mean that with for example, if there's already a casket buried and a spouse now dies, that an additional cost for the same plot to add an urn to that?
That has not been an option as the code is currently written, and it has been requested from time to time in the past. And I honestly think, if I'm remembering correctly, at the time this code was originally, and Mac may have discovered this in answering some of the original questions, I don't think that has always been a possibility under the law. I think there was a change in the law 10, 15 years ago maybe that started to allow for some of that double burial, and the town just never adjusted the code to allow for it. But I say all of that with the idea that if sales may increase as a result of that allowance, particularly if that allowance doesn't also result in some additional fee consideration, you may not be talking about this in a much shorter period of time than you think, because 300 spots may disappear much faster than historically they've been sold. That's only the...
Under the recommendations, consider, going back on the casket and the urn, consider updating the following fees. The second bullet, double plot allows for 2 urns or 1 casket, 1 urn. That would change to 1 plot though, right? Or am I wrong?
Well, what we would do is we would sell a plot, and they would either pay the amount to be able to bury 1 casket or 1 urn, or if they want that possibility of burying 2 items, then we would charge them that double plot fee.
For 1 plot?
Correct.
How does everyone feel about the numbers of 750 for a single, 1,500 for non-resident single, 1,000 for double, 2,000 for non-resident double?
I'm good with that.
I like it. That's great. That gives Jessica some guideline.
Appreciate that.
Yep.
So circle back to, there's a casket in the ground and somebody, and a spouse dies, and you now want to add that urn, spouse dies and is cremated, you now want to add that urn to the plot. What is the cost for that in your?
Double to double, so that either 250 or,
Okay,
yeah.
all right, to give some, okay, that's fine.
I wanted to revisit that with her as we
Okay.
put this together.
I just
Because
wanted to
I
get-
think there will potentially be an instance or two, just based again
Oh,
on those
yeah.
past questions where that may come up, so.
Okay.
Use. Yep.
Okay, good.
find that it's a lot easier to move cremated people from across state borders and things like that.
Right.
And so that's why that's an option if, maybe a spouse died here and then the surviving spouse moved somewhere else and, it's easier. Graham knows a lot about this. He has educated me.
Wait, we've left one, I just had it, we've left an end untied.
We didn't talk about the grave sighting.
We didn't, that, thank you.
Oh,
The
yes.
grave sighting, so let's go there. Thank you. Yeah, and I think that's important. Again, if nothing else, if we make it a higher rate on the weekend, it encourages people to not disrespect the staff by saying, oh, well, I can call them anytime. So make a plan, ask during the week. It's less of a fee then. If you contact Graham on the weekend and take his weekend from him, it's more of a fee.
I think what you suggested 50 and 100, right? I'm okay with that, I think.
Yeah, I think that's good too.
Regular business hours, it's 50, and
Weekends.
after business hour, evenings and weekends, it's 100.
It's not just to call him and get information, that's if he has to go out there. Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
And that's fair, because if we're talking about somebody that's an ancestor, who lived a
Right.
long time, they're probably prepared
They're
to
gonna-
have to pay whatever they
Right.
have to pay, because they know it's
Right.
been a long time, so
Right.
it's not like,
But it also encourages people to plan a little bit ahead and not inconvenience staff, which makes me happy. Okay. All right. Thanks, Jessica, for
Thank you.
grappling with
I
it.
appreciate.
Would you all mind if we take a quick break before we move on to 4B?
Yes.
All right, great. All right, I'll see everyone back at 4:30.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, BJ. I'm sorry.
I'm just calling the meeting back to order from our break, and we are going to be on item 4B, system development fee analysis.
Okay.
We have our town engineer.
Yes,
Thank
thanks
you,
for having me
James Mickle.
today. I want to start off saying this discussion is not meant to be a deep dive into the 30, 40-page SDF analysis that was attached. That was put there for reference. There will be a public hearing coming up in May where we'll have the engineers who prepared that document available to go through it in great detail. Today is more to be kind of a primer. I know most of the people on council, maybe actually all but Bill, were not here the last time the SDF came through, so we want to kind of just talk about what is an SDF, what does it mean, show a little bit of history, and then talk about potential budget implications as we're moving forward, as we're starting to prepare the budget documents and looking at the rate analysis. Some of the things that could be decided in May can radically affect which way that goes. So we want to kind of get an idea of, if there are certain scenarios or things that council's thinking about, we can be prepared when that time comes and, not trying to do it on the fly when we're at that meeting. So just a little bit of background, a system development fee, the definition's there, but it's essentially a way for a municipality or any, say, you're going backwards, Gerald.
Those are cemetery fees.
It's a fee that's meant to, assess for, capacity expansion or existing capacity in a system that's related to new development. Some years ago, there used to be a fee, it was called an impact fee in most places. Just about every municipality or county, charged those at one time or another, until a court case that actually came out of Carthage in which the Supreme Court ruled that municipalities did not have the authority to charge those fees. It was not specific. There's a lot there, I know.
I was going to say, did not have the authority to charge those unless they had a local bill so authorizing, which Southern Pines did have.
You jumped ahead of me.
Okay.
That's in here too.
It's kind of a key point, though.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so Southern Pines at that time did have specific, along with several other municipalities, specific local statutes that authorize us to have impact fees. So what the town was charging at the time was legal. It was just everybody else wasn't. That was 2017. After that, the general legislature got together. They created the general statute referenced here, 162A, Article 8. That authorized for everybody in the state to be able to assess impact fees while also removing all local authority related to that. They basically said, we're getting rid of everything as it is, and everybody is now following this one set of rules. So, part of that, thank you, Gerald, general statute, it defines the process by which a municipality or county would have to follow to be able to charge that fee. Very straightforward, basically said you have to do an analysis. You've got to look at the details, you've got to look at your capital plans, and, come up with something that is reasonable, something that, isn't just, I'm going to pull a number out of thin air and say this is what we're going to charge. It requires that proposal has a public input period. It's defined as a 45-day input or a 45-day review period that mandates, we provide a means that it's posted on a website and that we have a way to receive comments in writing during that 45-day period. At the end of that time, any of those comments can be addressed with the report, or you can just bring the report forward and make adjustments after it, but there has to be a public hearing held where not only you can go over the report, you can go over the comments received and receive any comments, at the actual hearing. After that, then it comes down to a choice by council to charge any fee up to the amount calculated in the report. So it is not something that you can charge more than, but it is something that council has the authority to charge less than if they wanted to. And then the last thing changed there was it just has to be done every 5 years. Thanks, Gerald. So the last time we did this, the process was completed in October of 2020. So we are actually about a year ahead of schedule. We would have until October 2025 before we would have to adopt a new one. Couple things, we want to get this process kind of more in line with the typical budget process, so we're not having to collect a certain rate through one part of the fiscal year and then change it over, 1/4 of the way in. And then, quite frankly, we have just seen cost skyrocket. 2020, everybody knows what happened in 2020, COVID, construction cost went through the roof. You can see here, we had $34 million in capital projects in the original 2020 CIP. Well, and the SDF eligible projects that were ran in that original report. Since that time, we now have $53 million in projects. And to keep in mind, that's not the same list. We've actually pulled 13 of projects off of it because we've completed them. And we've only added 4 back, and the cost has still gone up that much.
Understand the calculation of 34 million and 53 million. Is that what the developer is spending?
No, that is the town's estimated cost on a 10-year capital improvement plan.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
Some of that cost related to the relocation of the water line down US 1?
Not in the original report, but the most current version it is.
And can I just add, think back, appreciate that y'all didn't have to do all this through remote meetings. We did.
It sounds like you
We
had
were
fun
doing
doing
that through Zoom or whatever you called it.
We did,
in those
yeah.
meetings. So this is much better.
I remember that.
You just like our company.
How much of the 53 million is that? The relocation of the water line down US 1?
I want to say the town's portion of that cost is just shy of $2 million.
And so the only thing included is the 2 million?
Correct, yeah. It is only
Right.
the town's cost,
Right.
not the total cost of the project. So where we are, next slide, please. Freese and Nichols, the engineering firm that we contracted with to update the analysis. They've done that. We've gotten the report. It was posted on the website last week. We ran the public notice. It should have gone through the pilot on Sunday, and I know it's on the pilot's website right now. So we're saying the 45-day review period officially started on March 17th. That 45-day period will run through May 1st, at which time, we'll close, we'll take whatever comments that we've got. We'll discuss with the engineer if any of the comments change anything in the analysis. We'll make the adjustments as needed, and then we'll move forward with scheduling the public hearing, right now intended to be the regular meeting in May, which is now May 14th. Oh, yes, the 14th, yeah. So. Yep. Just give again, not deep diving the report, but just show you kind of where we were with the 2020 report and where we are now with the 2024 report. Fees did change, not as much as you would have thought when you say 34 to 53 million. Like I said, there's a lot of background calculation occurring there that the engineers can kind of walk us through. It has a lot to do with the size of the meters being installed, the amount of capacity that each one can give relative to the base meter, and, things can kind of make that go up and down.
Why did the one go down? What got better about 1-inch lines?
Say that calculation is further, I don't want to use the word complicated but you also have to remember that if you're looking at on the incremental or capacity side of the equation, if you are looking at a project that might provide capacity for another 20 or 25 years, you're only allowed to look at a 10-year window on that. So that will reduce the amount that goes into the SDF for purposes of calculation. In addition, there is a 25% credit to the developer, for lack of a better term, right off the top. So right off the top, 25% of the project is not eligible for SDF calculation. So, and then there's a lot more, as James said, relative to,
Behind the 25% right off the top?
that's simply part of what the
General statute
the
says.
general,
Okay.
yeah, it's
That's
part of the
proce-
statute.
that's-
It's not a local
Okay,
decision.
all
Yeah.
right, got it.
And well, in this particular case, Bill, what happened is we changed the type of water meters that we use. We used to use basic PD, positive displacement meters. We now have the electromagnetic kind. So there's, basically you can get more water through the same size meter than we used to. And just means that the 3/4 inch and the 1 inch meters are closer together in the amount of water that they could move relative to the old style. So that ratio shifted a little bit.
So the capacity of the meter has grown, which has increased the SDF.
No,
That's not what you said?
no, the capacity of the meter is only related to the calculation as it is a function of how much difference there is from meter to meter.
Oh, I thought you said that the 3/4 inch meter, because of the new meter, it allows more capacity.
So yeah, you can get more water through a new meter, but that alone does not necessitate a higher SDF. So what you're doing is looking at, the SDF is calculated on an ERU. It's basically, your baseline is essentially your single-family residential house.
Right.
And we basically say a 3/4 inch meter is the equivalent of a single house. So that's your base fee, that's the 4,600.
Right.
So a 1 inch meter becomes, and I don't have the chart in front of me, but for the sake of discussion, just say a 1 inch meter moves 2.5 times the amount of water that a 3/4 does. So the next unit of capacity is 2.5 times greater than,
Okay, I thought I misunderstood. I thought you said the new 3/4 inch meters allow greater capacity than the old 3/4 inch meters.
and they do.
Okay, so in that scenario, the greater capacity on the new 3/4 inch water meter adds to the capacity figured in this SDF because it allows more water.
No,
The question was around the relation, when you look at the previous analysis, which is what we're working under now, of 3/4 versus 1, and the question was around, if you look at that, the 1 actually goes down a little bit while the 3/4 inch goes up. So it's more, yes, the 3/4 is allowing greater capacity, but it's allowing even greater capacity relative to the 1 inch because of that. It's the relationship between the 3/4 and 1 that Bill asked the question about that brought the response that is now, I'm afraid, causing some confusion.
yeah.
So do we know what actual capacity on average is used on a residential 3/4 inch water line versus what it's rated to? I mean, is it calculated on max capacity or some amount of capacity?
The calculations are based upon the max capacity of a meter.
Okay, max capacity of the meter, and we don't have any idea of, if we took an average of, we don't know what actually is used.
We know what gets used as a result of the billing system, but
Right.
because this is about funding the infrastructure that allows for potential usage, you're buying the capacity. The actual usage has to do with the water bill and how many people ultimately flow through that meter.
Yeah, I get that. I was just wondering, the SDF is based on the max capacity of the meter, even though the max capacity that's actually used could be lower,
Correct.
and most likely is.
Well, yeah, the rate of water that is used could be less than the capacity available through the meter. Yeah. Yes. And then last slide, this is just our, I don't even want to say collections, because that kind of sounds bad, but, when we do budgeting and do the rate projections, that's that first column. You see, we assume about 150 ERUs and 130 sewer ERUs every year, and we project that out. And based on the current SDF, that 384 and the 209 number, that's what that relates to. And that's what we assume collection as we're looking at future rates and what it means for collection and expenses or receipts that could be applied to capital expense. The other columns are the amounts that we actually collected, and this gets a little confusing. We go until March of the fiscal year, we claim, in a manner of speaking, the amount that we've collected at that point, and that is what is applied to the next fiscal year's budget.
Stated another way if you're confused.
Sorry.
No, it's, the resolution for this is always one of the more interesting practices during budget season. when you look, and even when you look at fiscal year 23, 24, don't think of that as meters that have gone in the ground this year. That was the appropriation back on July 1 for this fiscal year. And what that represents is an estimated number or an appropriation amount based on the 150 and the 130 that James is showing, plus or minus. And in recent years, with the development that has occurred, it has been plus, but plus or minus the amount actually collected from April 1 to March 30th. And we set that date because our budget season says we really need to kind of come up with a number and do all of these things ahead of the May hearing and the June adoption. So it's 150, 130, plus or minus actual collections from April 1 to March 30th. So we're, in a couple of weeks, Tess is going to get to me the actual collections for within this fiscal year, and I will plus or minus that figure over a 150 or 130 and what that would generate. So I may have just confused you even further about the calculation. But so when you're looking at this, clearly the 150 we've been well ahead of. The sewer, and I can tell you unless something has changed since 2 weeks ago, the sewer is going to be really close to that 130 in this year when we're before you in a month or two. The water numbers and the reason that you see those so large in 21, 22 and 22, 23, it's not because we suddenly built 400 or 500 homes or something. We've done a lot more larger meters in recent years with the apartment complexes, with the big box retail, than what we have historically done or would ever want to contemplate setting as the estimate going into a year, because it won't be every year that we open a Target Center, clearly. We just don't have the land to be doing that. So when you see those big bumps, it's because of things like medical centers that have gone up with larger than 3/4 inch meters, as an example, and to further explain those numbers. Fortunately, that has coincided with a period in time where the actual projects have been extensively more expensive than what the first SDF report and second SDF report would have estimated them to be. So it has helped us at least be able to complete those projects and keep up. But that's just a little bit of what's behind those figures. So when you see ERU, don't think of an individual meter. It's not so much that we did 402. We did 402 equivalents of a 3/4 inch meter, but those were not 3/4 inch meters. We had some larger 1 and 2 inch meters in the system that generated a lot of additional dollars.
So Reagan, you said in a couple of days, yeah, because we're coming to the end of March. So I know we think of a fiscal year, different months. So you run from April to March 30th. So when you get those other figures, is that going to be for the 24, 25 year?
As an example, relative to this slide, those figures that I receive on March 30th and then do the calculation against the 150 and the 130, those would become the next column out here if we were
Right.
doing the same presentation next year.
Right, 24,
Yes.
25, got you. I'm cool.
So that budget column is this year?
That's every year moving forward.
That's just your baseline budget?
That's the baseline, yeah. Yeah, so when the original, yes, that's your base number. I'll be adding, or if we actually collected, if we only collected $380,000, what I would do for the upcoming budget is I would still take the 384 average, because that's what we're guesstimating based on 150. But then rather than adding overage from the past year, I would actually have to reduce it by 4,000 because it represents $4,000 we didn't collect between March 30th and April 1st. So it's a looking forward estimate plus or minus actual results between April and March, if that helps clarify it.
So will you come back to us and present an updated chart like this after you talk to Tess?
Well, I mean, I've not used this chart in the past. We can update the chart. What you will see as a result of those final numbers because we'll draw the line on March 30th and add it up, is there is three of you may recall from the budget that you adopted. In June, you see a resolution on that budget that is very specific to the appropriation of these SDF fees. And it talks about each of the projects that are in. It has a detail of, here's the estimated cost of the project. Sometimes, typically that estimated cost is straight out of this report. If it's a project that we've already moved forward in bid, we'll start adjusting the numbers because it will talk about what the project is, how much either the estimate or the contract price ended up being, the percentage of project that is eligible for SDF and what that maximum number is based on either estimate or contract price. Any money that is previously been put into that capital project fund, any money that is being asked for relative to moving into that project fund. Where it looks like, and this is purely based on preliminary figures, I think we are going to be able to, with the collections I'm talking about through March 30th of this year, I think we're going to be able to essentially, quote, close out the Penn PD project, both the project because it's done, but also the SDF contribution based upon the percentage that was eligible for that. And there will be a request for appropriation toward, but the amount of that request will just be whatever's kind of left over. There will be a request for appropriation toward the North Pressure Zone project, which is sort of water tank up in the vicinity of Fire Station 2, et cetera. Now, that is a sizable project, so for a number of years, even if we would happen to get a couple of those million-dollar years, for a number of years, that is, in all likelihood, the project that will receive appropriation of SDF funds until such time that the aggregate amount of SDF funds appropriated equals the eligible amount under the calculation, not only by the estimate, but ultimately of the total project costs. And then we'll move to the next project on the list.
Freeze and Nichols are going to present their, okay. And maybe this is a better question for them, but maintenance of existing facilities is a part of the SDF.
Yes, as the report is currently written, it includes what we call the buy-in projects, which involves things like rehab and replacement. So maintenance really isn't the right word. Maintenance is us digging up and fixing a break. But it does account for improving, upgrading, and rehabilitating existing infrastructure.
So excess capacity that is sold through interlocal agreements to others. Is the excess capacity this also calculated in SDF? The need for excess capacity or that's why I don't guess. I might be a better question for them, but
Understand the question, because
we have agreements to sell excess capacity to other areas.
Sure.
Is that excess capacity, treatment, maintenance of that excess capacity, enter into the equation of SDF? Like, for example.
okay, I'm following the question. I'll get clarity on that. Make sure they answer that when they get here.
Okay.
You're purchasing existing capacity. It's not so much what you're generating in bulk water sales, because that's essentially what you're talking about with excess capacity. You're purchasing previously created capacity in the system, honestly, at a pretty heavily discounted rate. And the reason I say that is the values that are used as part of the buy-in calculation are the depreciated values of the asset. So for instance, the water plant, based upon the year it was built, isn't being valued at nearly what it would cost to actually rebuild and replace it at this point in time. So it's, I think I understand the question
Yeah.
and where you're headed with it, but I don't know that it's I don't know that it's entirely a related item either relative to the SDF.
Meaning it doesn't figure into the calculation of SDF.
There isn't, I don't think there's anything in the calculation that says, oh, more counties buying 1 million gallons from you a day. And
It would all be about capacity, right?
Yeah. And like I said, we can get clarity on it. I don't want to say with 100% certainty that,
Well,
because there's, again, a fair
Right.
bit of background
on
stuff.
stuff, yeah.
to my fellow council members, it is easy to look at this as a cost borne by developers, and that is the case in large developments. But on a single-family home, this is a cost borne by the citizen. So keep that in mind when we're talking about excess costs and additional costs. If it works out that way, if it's a public need, I get it. But when we sit around and talk about affordable housing and things like that, these things enter into the equation. And it's easy to think in your mind, this developers pay this cost. That's not always the case on a single-family development. Right, it's passed along.
I mean, the flip side of that, and I understand that, if we don't have this, our water rates or something's gonna have to jack up, it's either the tax rate or the water rates, because we struggle to pay for the infrastructure upkeep as is. And if you take this away, it's gotta come from somewhere.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that at all. It's just about being understanding of a 10% increase is a 10% increase, no matter how you look at it. And that's not the only cost that goes into it. I mean, it's the system development fee, it's the TAP fees, it's the permitting fees. All that adds up to the cost of building a house. So it is a fee. It is
And
a tax
also
that comes on.
ultimately, a house is going to sell for what the market will bear. And there are homes selling in Southern Pines for
I don't disagree with
significantly
you.
more than the exact same house located somewhere
I
else.
don't disagree with you, but we
It's-
all have a special place in our heart on affordable housing. And this enters into the equation of affordable housing.
I appreciate your comments, Brandon. And that may be something that we may, I don't know, when or how we could explore maybe other ways to garner revenue, because I'm hearing what Bill is saying in terms of maintaining the structure of our town and where are we getting income, where are we getting the money, so.
Right.
It just
Well,
may be
it's a bit regressive in the sense that no matter if you build a 5,000 square foot house or a 1,500 square foot house, you pay the same price. Even though your usage is less, you pay the same price because they're both using, in most cases, the same meter. One more question. So is time value of money at all considered in SDF? Like, is it discounted based on investment revenue at all? Or is it even possible to be invested? Is it like an enterprise fund or it's a capital fund, actually? It's a capital fund. Can those monies get a rate of return?
Yes, until such time that they're spent, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So does that at all enter into the equation of SDF?
I'm going to say most likely not. I don't think there's a specific place in there to account for interest earned. I don't know that it's a really significant number, but I will say that time value is included in it just by the fact that when we estimate the cost of capital projects,
Today's dollars.
generally, we estimate in today's dollars, then we say, we expect that project to be built in 5 years. So you add an adjustment factor for every year it's out. So the adjustment or the estimated cost in the capital budget is trying to account for that increased cost over time.
And again, I made the comment that PD Penn just happens to be lining up with the money that we'll be looking to appropriate this year, but that is, I'm going to say it's a rarity, and it's not always going to be the case. Oftentimes, by the time these funds are received, they've already been appropriated against a project and spent, and what you're
And spent? I didn't know that.
And what you're doing is, you're taking funds that you appropriated out of retained earnings or early on for us, early impact fees before the SDF was a thing. And you're saying, all right, we're now appropriating these SDF fees to that project, which then frees up those previously spent funds from an accounting standpoint for the next project that you're kind of working on. That's another way of saying, more often than not, there's not just money sitting in a bank drawing some interest. Now, while you're kind of collecting these and doing that, that is a possibility. And honestly, up until recently, even any interest it was drawing was exceptionally low, as you're well aware.
But now, it is not. Now it's 5%, hopefully.
So James, is Freeze and Nichols, are Freeze and Nichols coming back to us at another time and presenting the longer version of this?
Yes, they will be here for the actual public hearing in May.
Clarifying that, thank you. Are there other questions from the council, or do you have more to add?
I'll ask one thing, because it does impact our rate analysis. If there is any consideration or desire that you think you might consider doing something less than what is ultimately recommended in the report, that can have an impact on those rate projections. So if there's an idea or a scenario that you would like us to run, just so we have a comparison, that would be helpful.
So I'll ask, on page 30, the fourth bullet point down says adopt a fee not to exceed the analysis's calculated fee. What criteria would another town use to decide if they are charging less than the calculated fee?
I'm not aware of an actual policy associated with that from anybody. I won't speak for everybody in the state of North Carolina, but the ones I kind of generally check on, all but one charge the recommended rate.
Okay. I was trying to decide or trying to figure out if there are people who are trying to encourage development or encourage low-income housing, or if there was a pattern or a reason for why they would do less than.
Mayor,
Yes, please.
I can respond to that. I've done some work for some other communities on this issue, and it's not about affordable housing. It's usually because the fee is set so high, or the study would support a fee that's so high that it would kill their housing market. I'm familiar with one community where the study came back and said that the maximum fee they could charge would be $39,000. The system needs were immense, and they set it at about $13,000 because that seemed to be a market analysis of a fee that wouldn't depress their housing market.
Actually in a very good position relative to sort of having some available capacity, having plans to grow that very slowly over time. When you get into these very explosive growth areas around Wake and Johnston and Meck counties, they're literally, whereas we might be talking about building a water tank or expanding the size of a line, they're building plants. And as Mac is pointing out, this analysis, even with 25% discounts, and it can turn in maximum potential fees of $39,000 per unit, which really then does become a challenge in the affordable housing market, amongst other things. So our figures are not bad, generally speaking, as when you get into some of those other areas.
The next fee is how do we compare, and I feel like at some point we saw it. How are our calculated fees as compared to some of the surrounding areas? Do we know?
I can tell you, I just looked up a few this morning. Aberdeen being right next door, there for a round number, 1850. Holly Springs is 11,820.
Is that water or combined?
These are all combined, water and sewer, sorry.
Tell me those numbers one more time, because I think my numbers are a decimal point off. You said 1850 and then you said 11,000.
Yeah, so Aberdeen is $1,849.60,
Okay.
to be exact. Holly Springs is $11,820. Apex is $7,078. Sanford is $2,969.90.
Are these the calculated fees of what they are not to exceed, or are these what they're charging?
These are all the calculated
Okay.
and charged fees.
Yeah, it will vary greatly depending on age of system, growth projections. There's a lot that goes into it.
I want you to keep on that roll, but let me ask you, when those other communities, do they have sewer treatment themselves, or, I know Aberdeen probably doesn't, but does Sanford? Do they treat their
Sanford
own sewer?
does.
They treat their own sewer?
Sanford has water and sewer all around.
Okay.
Apex, I'm not sure if they're a part of the larger Wake Regional System or not, or if they have their own plant, to be honest.
I think they're part of the larger Wake Seas, but we'd have to look at that.
Holly Springs, I think, is a combination of both. I think they have their own plant plus are part of the regional
Right.
system. Pittsboro, which Mac just mentioned, they have a calculated of 39,000, but only charge, said 13. I wasn't able to find that earlier. Fuquay, $7,800. Moore County's $3,987. So, and again, that's just from
Quay's Water, because I think they are part of a larger sewer system, if I recall.
well, they still have a component that is sewer.
Collection.
For collection.
Right.
Yeah, they don't necessarily have, and again, if you were to break all those down, some will be twice as much sewer, some will be twice as much water. It just really depends on what each system is.
Yeah.
Moore County number one more time.
3,987.
Now the max of what their last report said, because I know they did not initially charge.
That is what they are charging now, when I looked at their rate sheet this morning, and what their calculated maximum is.
Yeah, they did some kind of phase-in or something that.
They might have started out doing that, but I guess they got caught up.
So that number would compare to our 3/4 inch number, right?
Yeah, all these are your base fee, 3/4 inch meter, single ERU.
Moore County will be undergoing, if in fact they're going to build a plant elsewhere in the county, they'll be taking a look at a new study, would be my guess.
Well, I think they do one every year as part of their rate analysis with Praftellis
okay.
anyway, so.
All right, that answers my questions. Thank you.
Anything else?
I think we're good. Ann, did you have anything?
Thank you, James.
Ann, you're pondering. I was like, I feel like there's something else. No, we're good?
I don't have my Sanford number. I missed the last two digits of it, 29 something, something.
$2,969.90.
Thanks. Sounds a lot like $2,970 to me.
Except you're not allowed under general statute.
Should charge that last 10 cents. That's right. That's right.
So if I'm looking at this, the current one for us was that 4626?
Yes.
Okay, comparing Southern Pines to those other numbers.
Yeah, that's the proposed, the existing is 4178.
And again, when you get, if you go back and look at your resolution from last June, or when you get the next one coming up, these round figures are then further broken out into the incremental new and the buy-in numbers, and we attribute those appropriately. Most all of your buy-in figures on the water side involve the water plant itself. Most all of your buy-in figures on the sewer side involve the rehabilitation and replacement program we've been undertaking to get a lot of the old clay and SSOs and things taken care of, so.
Thank you, Mr. Mickle. All right, we're moving on to Planning Department update. I assume that is Planning Director Grieve. Yes.
Give your voice back. All right.
Good evening, members of council. Quick planning department update. The March 21st Planning Board meeting, which will be occurring Thursday night, there are 2 items on the agenda that are heading to you at your April 9th Town Council meeting. The first is an amendment to the boundary of the Mid-South development. The second is a PDP for what is being referred to as Phase 2 of Belle Meade. Phase 1 is the original developed area. Phase 2 is the area where
They had a doctor's office and a daycare, and they're going to bulldoze those and put in some additional housing. It's called Phase 2, and it was in their CDP. They're going to come in now with that PDP for Phase 2. 2 quasi-judicial decisions, as well as a watershed protection permit for about 1/4 of an acre at 650 East Ohio, so that somebody can build a shed or a workshop in their backyard. Then because of the way the meeting dates have fallen, prior to the next time I'm able to update you, there will also be an April 18th planning board meeting, which the agenda looks pretty well set at this point. It contains, as I mentioned earlier, a text amendment for a privately initiated text amendment for an adjustment of the distance that is required between a cellular tower and a residential zone from a cellular tower representative, as well as that Ace Hardware CDP amendment. Just a couple of quick notes. The status of the Character District project, I wanted to give you a quick update. You may recall there was a Phase 1 study where their research of character districts, they wrapped it up, culminated in a study that was published on our website. The Phase 2 report was where they responded with their analysis of what are the architectural characteristics of the different character districts that were studied, the West Southern Pines District, the downtown and downtown adjacent character districts. That Phase 2 report was posted online, as well as an email went out to those interested, and that information went out on March 13th. On March 28th, there is a meeting scheduled here at the Douglas Community Center at 6 o'clock, where the consultant will come to town. There have been a number of meetings each time the consultants have come in the different character districts, where they've talked about what is it that makes this character district special, what do you think is important. Now what will happen is there will be one meeting where the consultant will be there to present some examples of character district standards that the consultant hopes will enhance the character of that area, that will retain it, preserve it, and enhance it through various elements of site design as well as building design. I wouldn't go so far as to call them the draft text amendments to be presented, but I would say they're definitely some well-baked concepts of here's what seems to be, how does this resonate with those who choose to attend. Rather than going out to all the different character districts repeatedly, this meeting now is going to bring everybody into one place so everybody can kind of see and learn from the other character districts. The character districts right now, I'm looking at the May Planning Board and June Town Council. That issue with the May Planning Board and the going to the Haney Room and having that on the agenda as well as other things, I just went ahead and bumped it a month because we're not in a hurry necessarily, and some of those things can help. What I'm noticing is we had a pretty aggressive timeline for getting a lot of big text amendments back to month to month, and we ran into some very predictable problems with just getting the document reformatted and reposted and getting the next set of text amendments into that document, having people get very confused about what's going on at planning board and what's going on at town council in the same month for big projects like that. It helps, we just need to spread them back out a little bit. So along those lines, the next thing then is Elena continues to work on what we're referring to as the landscaping and tree protection amendments. She is vetting that project with a lot of folks, as well as getting some consulting work done for some diagrams to visually depict the standards to help with interpretation, and those will be in an appendix of the UDO, and I think they're going to be very, very helpful to folks, because some of the current landscaping standards get very overwhelming when you're just reading it on paper. And actually, a picture's worth 1,000 words when it comes to depicting landscaping standards. And that committee, the focus group with whom she's working, are giving her great feedback about our current list of recommended plantings. Many of them don't work. Some of them are great. Some of them that aren't even on the list are better. And so they're modifying all that. She's gotten a lot of positive feedback from everybody who uses and lives in that space professionally. So that's going on, and I would project right now that'll come in. The timing of that is still a little bit weird because those are another two big text amendments. I don't really want to put them on top of each other, run them through at the same time. How far to spread them out and how far that pushes later into the calendar year is kind of a challenge. I'll keep you posted on that. I wanted to let you know that administrative review of architectural compliance permits is fantastic. It's helping to encourage a lot of additional compliance. People hear that they can, for anything under 10,000 square feet, they can just comply and they can be administratively reviewed. It's very, very helpful. I also want to put on your radar that the issue of tourist homes, that we just amended the definition for tourist homes. And we were kind of hoping, hey, that's phase one. We'll wait and see on phase two. Phase two, you might want to begin to think about how you feel about tourist homes. because there is a lot of energy right now erupting over the subject of tourist homes. There's a lot of rabid opponents to tourist homes, and there's a lot of supporters of tourist homes, and Lisa's phone is ringing more and more frequently. So if you feel like it's just not something you hear much about, it won't be long, let me tell you. It's got that energy to it that we're only going to be able to continue to deal with it on a case-by-case basis for so long. As you know, tourist homes are presently a by right use in the CB, GB, and OS districts, central business, general business, and office services. They are not technically allowed in residential zones. And there are a lot of people doing them. There's a lot of people who want to do them. And we get phone calls, I would say at this point, daily from people who are very upset with one way or the other. So just letting you know, that's out there. And I'm off next week, so I just wanted to let you know. Where are you going? Family station wagon road trip to Chicago.
Enjoy your vacation.
Man, that's nice.
Will there be sports events involved?
No, not this year. No, we thought about going to a White Sox game, the home opener on Thursday, but that wasn't really a priority.
White Sox doing anything?
What?
I mean, I've never even heard of the White Sox in years now. I mean, yeah.
BJ, the character district names, where did those originate, or how did those originate?
Yeah, they're in the 2040 comprehensive plan. There are 10 character districts that the consultant identified. The boundaries of them were not set in stone, but it was essentially 10 areas that the consultant identified as being unique within the Southern Pines jurisdiction, as places that had some of them I will say were the rest of it. You know, there were things it was called.
The balance.
Hamlets was one of them, suburban settlements was another. It was kind of like, there's a lot of stuff here that it's hard to put. But there was about 6 or 7 that were very unique. The obvious ones: Horse Country, downtown adjacent, West Southern Pines. These were places where the consultant felt very strongly, hey, there is a sense of place here.
Specifically the naming, though, like Horse Country, was that like a survey, or it's just the consultant?
Consultant put them in, it did go through the draft process,
Okay.
It did go through, but no, they're not set in stone. So if there's a zippier name for any of them,
Zippier's a good
that's
word.
certainly, yeah. If any of them are just a little, if downtown adjacent is not quite,
That one specifically.
take great pride in being a part of the downtown adjacent zone,
Right.
character district. Yeah.
And one more question on that. Do you ever see the possibility or the need of overlays based on character districts?
So that sector districts would in fact be zoning overlays.
Okay.
That would provide, you might say, alternative standards when you're applying for an architectural compliance permit and/or site plan review. If you are in one area, you'd say, these are my standards. Those are the standards that are jurisdiction-wide. But if you're in a character district that has adopted an overlay, you would say, oh, my site design and building characteristics are further enhanced by the overlay, and that's how you would know that going into it. You'd look to your location, you'd see it like a zoning layer.
Yeah, got you. Thank you.
Bridget, did we change anything recently in terms of allowing certain places to have tourist homes?
Great question. Someone must have called you.
Yeah, I did. I got a text. I did.
So that came up recently. We did have let me try to be as brief as possible. We got a meeting with a number of complainants who were very, very upset about alleged tourist homes taking place in their neighborhood. We sent letters to the alleged violators. We did conduct an investigation. We found evidence that they were being used as tourist homes in a zone where they're not allowed to be used, and we sent letters. Those letters were then forwarded to a number of real estate professionals who were aware that in January we had adopted text amendments related to tourist homes. And they connected that with, we began prohibiting tourist homes in January, which is just not the case at all. So there was a misunderstanding. What actually occurred in January, as you will recall, is merely we brought forward a text amendment to modify the definition of a tourist home to be clearer about what it is, which I will say has been very helpful for Lisa in her code compliance, because she can now say, here's what it is, here's what it is not. And we don't have to have that sort of awkward conversation where we say, here's how we interpret that. And even with that enhanced definition, that has not been what's led to the current energy being that we're seeing. But you might say nothing more than the coincidence that we recently did a text amendment on the topic of tourist homes, and now there were letters that went out to violators who we had evidence were in violation of the technical code at this time, informing them that we had evidence they were in violation and what the standards were. And when it got communicated to those who began making phone calls, it began to come around that the town had banned them as of January, and they wanted to know why we were sending these letters because they were grandfathered. And it was just it was a misunderstanding. So, yeah. But we do have some very upset folks on both sides of the tourist home situation right now that are, the energy is increasing. Yeah. So it's a kind of a heads up that start thinking about that issue and how you feel about it.
No, thank you. And well, maybe it was a Tri-Cities meeting where they showed us a chart of like per units per the municipalities. We were far lower than some other surrounding towns, which is probably why we have not gotten the same extent to date. But thanks for the heads up.
Yeah, it only really takes some folks who come in and begin to submit complaint forms, and then we are obliged to investigate. And once we find adequate evidence of wrongdoing pursuant to the code, we are obliged to send a letter. And boy, neighborhoods really explode at that point. You know, everybody feels very differently about that topic.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Thank you.
All right, moving on to the council roundtable. Councilman Goodman, would you like to start us, and we'll work around?
Thank you, Mayor. Really, the only thing I have, and I want to ask Reagan maybe a question too about this, and possibly an item maybe for a work session meeting coming up, is the sales and use tax report that you've been sending out. I'd just like to know more. It's a little bit, I don't understand exactly what I'm looking at when I see the spreadsheet, and specifically like what is Article 39 and what is Article 40?
Okay.
And
I can get you some stuff on that in advance of it, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the numbers themselves and what it means for the budget proposal at the retreat. So,
Yeah.
but let me get you at least a basic primer. And off the top of my head, I want to say if you go to your, I keep calling it a CAFR because that's what it was for
Yeah.
ever and a day, but ACFR. I think there's
The audit report?
Yes, I think there is a definitional chapter in there, but I'll get you something on that.
Are all of these restricted, or are some of them unrestricted, or?
They're all unrestricted
All
funds.
are unrestricted except for
Yes,
maybe the hold
yes,
harmless?
They have different, well, they're all unrestricted funds.
Okay.
They
All
have different,
unrestricted.
some of them have different calculations relative to distribution. Like 3 of the 4 are based on population, 1 of the 4
I
are based
gotcha.
on point of sale, but they're all unrestricted funds.
Okay, thanks. That's all I have.
Nothing. All my questions have been answered earlier today and in the meeting. We're good. I was worried about historic district and addressed that this morning, and that had clearly been talked about and dealt with in the meeting, so thank you. Want to make sure they were in the loop in regard to
town
possible.
hall.
Right, in regard to possible changes with town hall, yeah. I appreciate meeting this morning with you, Mr. Parsons. Thank you.
Good. Councilman Payton.
Let's see. Yeah, I'll just mention, last night, actually, Town Manager Parsons and I had the privilege of sort of representing Southern Pines at attendance of the More 100 meeting. It was at the Beehawk new distillery, which is fantastic. And so I know Brad and Jessica Halling have had their official ribbon cutting. Last night, they hosted a big event, and it is now open, and it is an awesome addition to Southern Pines. They have been complimentary every time they've had sort of a public event as to how great the town was to work with, speaking excellently of staff. And, you know, in a good way. I think they were like, you know, you have requirements and rules, but the staff told us what they were and how to work around them or how to work with them. And so they've been, no, but they've been very complimentary. That project is awesome. So if anybody has not been there yet, go check it out.
Ended?
Yeah. Well, a ton of people there. Yeah, it was great.
Councilwoman Gray.
Yeah, major praise to our town manager and our police department. There was an incident that came to my attention by way of text, and because of Reagan's dutifulness in investigating as best he could, which was great, to our chief of police, and a phone call that I was able to have with the chief and the deputy chief. I was able to tell the residents of our community that our town acted in great order. It was something that came in one of our emails having to do with a lady's dog that was mauled. Her dog was not on a leash. The dogs that mauled the dog were on a leash, but they got away from their owner, and it was just crazy. But it was all handled well, and I was really, really grateful for that. It gave me kudos as as a member of a resident of West Southern Pines that sits on the council, and I don't think this was the reason why, but there's supposed to be a celebration to honor me, not just me, but as being the first Black female to be represented on the town council. It's supposed to be April 14th, and I wouldn't even tell y'all about it, except that.
Of course you should. Why would you not?
No, it's because I don't mean I'm not looking for praise. I'm looking to work. But we have something within our town council, that's unique. I know Councilman Pate, Mayor Clement, Councilman Peterson, y'all have all been on the town council. Councilman Goodman and I are new jacks, and there's a special chemistry, and I think it's being well respected within our community. And the only reason why I mentioned this whole thing about me is because having somebody from the council or somebody from the town to come, it just solidifies even more in the eyes of our community that we are truly one council for the benefit of our whole town, that we care about everybody, and we're going to do the best job we can. And it just brings that even more so. You know, who was it that just said, I think maybe BJ in his comments, or maybe James, you know, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Your presence brings a picture to the community. The event is going to be at Down Memory Lane. Y'all probably don't even know what Down Memory Lane is. You know what it is? Dang! Bill gets around. God. So I barely know what that place is. But anyway, it's going to be there.
On April
There are
14th.
tickets. April 14th, yeah. The
What
tickets,
time?
it will be at 2:00, which is on a Sunday, y'all. So I have to do my worship service early to get out of there, take off the collar and put on something else.
It's behind the bowling alley.
Okay. And then how do you get tickets?
I have the tickets. They're $30. They are also honoring the African-American retired teachers in our community that were once part of the segregated school here in West Southern Pines. And so it's going to be I think it's going to be a little nice event. So yeah, it'll be food. So.
If I may, very quickly, first, congratulations on all of that. Your commentary regarding the dog incident, though, just to let you all know, we continue to have an increasing number of complaints about off-leash dogs at Whitehall, including some calls now about incidents out there. So I know Chief Polidori had approached me about it. I think as he can free some people up, we may put some people out there and be handing out warnings and/or fines and tickets, depending on how that goes. But I wanted to advise you all of that because it continues to be a challenge, and apparently it's a further developing one. So before you got a call about why is there an officer at Whitehall, we're just trying to avoid that sort of problem, so.
Okay, thank you. Did you have anything else? No. Okay. I have a couple things, some of which I've talked to you guys about individually, and some I haven't. They're all things that I kind of would like the council to agree on. They're recommendations. I think Attorney McCarley is working on an ethics statement update. Until then, I just want to make sure that everyone has read the one that Clerk Robertson has sent to us. And now I'm off my train of thought. And that we're abiding that ethics statement. Along with that, I was thinking that maybe our attorney could draft a quick statement. The nonprofit boards that I've served on have a statement of intent or purpose or mission read at the beginning of every meeting. And I think maybe our general business meetings, we could alternate taking turns reading a basic, the intent or ethics statement, something that's just a sentence, 2 at the most? Okay. Also along those lines, Councilwoman Peterson had mentioned the potential of having someone read the pledge or lead the pledge at our general meetings. If we can put something online where they can sign up for it and give them a deadline, and if we don't have someone sign up, we'll just go ahead and do the Pledge of Allegiance as normal. But if somebody, like one of the
That used to happen.
Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts.
Yeah, I knew because I came
Yeah.
with my daughter. I know Jim Simeon was, I think, big into that. I don't know if he recruited those
He
groups.
did. There was, I'll say there was a council member appointed, but it was Jim.
And then town staff would make certificates and they would present them. It was, I mean, it was really awesome, but I know it takes a lot of effort and work. So that just,
Well, if the 5 of us would
People, and I think
just,
that
or
when.
put the idea out there.
Council, when the mayor made a comment that she would like to recognize the young man who had intervened on the Pinecrest situation when there was someone was accosted there. And that, what a great way to honor somebody. That's perfect. So, if you have somebody who has done something to enhance the town, I think we just offer them an opportunity to do that, yeah.
do you anticipate that as just to lead the pledge or as a lead the pledge / commendation for
Whatever you
good
all
works?
think is appropriate. I mean, I think if you all think a recognition to the person, is that how it was done before? Lead the pledge and then hand them something?
Yeah.
Okay. If we get people who want recognition or it makes sense, otherwise if it's, an Eagle Scout, it's maybe just a brief introduction and they lead the pledge.
I will say that at one of the meetings we had, a former student of mine whose father came in, she didn't come in, but she is currently in medical school in Poland helping with the injured coming across the border from Ukraine, and what a missed opportunity. So to recognize her, it's extraordinary what some of the young people in town are doing, so
Yeah.
love to do that.
Good.
Be a missed opportunity, and we may be able to do something for her. She's still one
It's
of
going to
ours.
be tough, she's in Poland right now.
Well, no, not right now. Not right now, but she'll
If
be
she
back.
returns, I'll
Yeah.
try to capture her.
Okay. I feel like at some point we did the Pledge of Allegiance before work sessions. Can we bring that back?
We can, yeah. I don't
Okay.
recall doing that, but that's not a problem.
Okay. In my imagination, we did. We'll start it again. Okay. Okay. And then a general level of decorum. I want to say I really appreciate that the staff consistently refers to council members with a title and a last name. And I realized this past Tuesday night, that us council members are the ones that tend to fall into the very casual, calling people by their first names with each other, but also with staff. And I think that for someone who is watching the meeting, I think it's important to refer to our staff by their title to make sure that whoever is watching understands that BJ's not just a friend coming up here, but he's actually the planning director. Exactly. Do you all feel comfortable with that?
That's great.
Okay. I think that's all that's on my list. Unless I've talked to one of you all about something that I am not remembering.
If I may very quickly, to save you some time and anybody that may be watching the streaming and going to the website, it is not in that audit document, but I am in my mind envisioning a very good explanation and definition. I just have to find the document that it's in. And it is an available document on the website, but it's not that document. So don't spend your time there. We'll get you something.
All right. If there's no other comments, I am waiting for a motion to adjourn.
Sorry, Bill, no, say,
All right.
make a
all-
motion that we adjourn.
All right.
Aye.
Beth, did you get a
All in-
second? Did somebody second that? Did somebody second?
I think Bill,
A second.
Yeah. Oh, okay. And your second? Aye.
aye.
Are you in favor, Councilman Bate? Bate? I said Bate. Oh, God.